Indigenous, peasant, and afro-descendant communities in Colombia mobilized to denounce the lack of economic and social attention from the government of Ivan Duque. In Mexico, health authorities reached the goal of vaccinating the entire adult population with at least one dose of anti-COVID-19 jabs. The United States envoy to the Horn of Africa confirmed having met with the leading general of the coup in Sudan, who decided to dissolve the transitional government. Hello from the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana. I'm Fred Gomez, and this is from the South. So we begin with the news. In Colombia, indigenous, farmer, and afro-descendant communities mobilized to denounce the lack of economic and social support from the Ivan Duque government. Members of the Wayu indigenous community were among the participants who denounced the humanitarian crisis that they are suffering. Our correspondent Hernan Tobar brings us the details in the following report.
To travel more than 1,000 kilometers from La Guajira to the city of Bogota to report the serious humanitarian crisis they are experiencing, denouncing that the Cerrejón coal mine has diverted and dried up around 17 water bodies, resulting in the displacement, eviction, and confinement of at least 25 Afro-Colombian farming and indigenous communities. Today they attend a public hearing convened by members of opposition to the Ivan Duque administration in the Colombian Senate.
By leaving us without water, there is no life, and there is no life for humans. There is no life for animals. There is no life for vegetation. And what happens in that case? The Wahoo culture disappears from what territory, and thus they are free to act the way they want to. That is what they are seeking, to make us disappear.
Previously, young people from the Guajiros and Wayu communities carried out hunger strikes in the Plaza de Bolívar in Bogota during the discussion of the 2022 national budget in the Colombian Congress. Their intention was to demand that the initiatives for human development, with a focus on the rights for these communities, be prioritized. Their demands were not heard and the violations continue. Wayu children with respiratory diseases or suffering malnutrition have died. The community claims that in recent years, more than 5,000 have died due to these conditions.
Ultimately, a budget is approved without efforts for state police to address the situation in the Department of La Guajira. In that sense, on October 20th, we decided to suspend the strike with the idea that we will have to build new scenarios to continue fighting in favor of our territory.
Other sectors that also demonstrated include Afro and indigenous communities engaged in craft mining in the Department of Choco, who have already completed 10 days of mobilizations denouncing the lack of guarantees to carry out this ancestral trade and claiming that local miners are persecuted and prosecuted. This strike is carried out in municipalities such as Quibdó, Condoto, East Mina, Tado, and Lloro.
Mining workers who struggle day by day for the livelihood of their families request the implementation of a plan to formalize and legalize small-scale mining and ancestral mining. The communities demand nothing more than guarantees and rights for a dignified life, and that the large multinational mining companies pay the fair price for what they extract from the territory.
In this context, and in view of the government's neglect in different territories and communities, violence continues to escalate against social leaders and human rights defenders, who promote these mobilizations and bring about changes within their territories. According to the Institute for Peace Studies, 142 have been murdered so far this year.
Hernan Darío Tobar, TeleSUR, Bogotá, Colombia.
Also in Colombia, the International Disciplinary Court decided on Thursday to close the preliminary exam on human rights violations perpetrated by armed actors of the national conflict. Since 2014, the investigation centered around clarifying the war crimes and crimes against humanity carried out during the armed conflict. For the closing of the preliminary evaluation of the organization, argued that the Special Jurisdiction for Peace had made progress in the investigations. The final report detailed that before the procedure, the judicial system had not evidenced any strong offensives against international crime in Colombia territory. The Attorney's Office of the International Disciplinary Court will continue working in the country in a close relation with the Special Jurisdiction for Peace. The president of Argentina, Alberto Fernandez, exempted the former head of state, Mauricio Macri, from holding military secrets in the probe of spying on relatives of the sailors who died in the Ara San Juan submarine that sank in 2017. The measure exempts Macri's obligation to hold military secrets, which allows him to return to the Dolores courts to testify after the proceedings were suspended since the judge in charge of the hearing was unable to complete the necessary requirements for releasing the former president of his obligations to hold sensitive information. Mauricio Macri refused to appear before the court in the previous two hearings, and an investigation over his involvement for spying on relatives of the sailors who died in the submarine that sank in 2017. Ara San Juan disappeared on November 15 along with its crew of 44 sailors. It sailed from Ushuaia in the far south of Argentina, returning to its base in Mar del Plata after participating in a training exercise. The remains of the ship were discovered a year after its disappearance in the Atlantic Ocean, but the government deemed it was unable to recover it. On Thursday, the electoral campaign period officially began ahead of the regional polls to be held on November 21st. The president of the National Electoral Council, Pedro Calzadilla, announced that the campaign should become a mere space for debate and that the candidates must offer their messages to the national, regional, and local electorate in a responsible, honest, and clear manner. Calzadilla also emphasized that the compliance with the electoral schedule, which also consists of the execution of 9 audits endorsed by technical representatives of all participating parties, demonstrating once again the transparency and security of the vote in Venezuela. In the meantime, the European Union's election observation mission to Venezuela, the first in 15 years, has begun deploying observers. We'll be right back after this very short break. Welcome back. In Mexico, health authorities have reached a goal of vaccinating the entire adult population with at least one dose of anti-COVID-19 jabs. President Andrés Manuel López Obrador informed that by the end of October, his government managed to hold up to the task of having begun the immunization process against the worldwide virus in all women, men, and others over 18 years of age. The head of state announced that the national vaccination plan will continue with the application of the second doses, highlighting the effectiveness of the shots administered since December 2020. Afterwards, López Obrador stated that the vaccination rates in Mexico are higher than in other countries.
There's good news. We have accomplished the task of administering at least one dose to all Mexicans over 18 years of age. We have come a long way, but of course, there are people who have refused to get vaccinated. However, they are changing their minds. We will continue now with the plan and begin with the second doses. This convince those who still aren't on board.
China reported 48 new locally transmitted COVID-19 cases, according to the National Health Commission. On the new local cases, 19 were reported in Inner Mongolia, 12 in Gansu, 9 in Heilongjiang, 3 in Qinghai, 2 each in Peichin and Ningxia, and 1 in Yunnan. The Commission also reported 16 new imported cases. 5 of the new imported cases were reconfirmed to be active cases from asymptomatic cases. No deaths related to the epidemic were reported. A total of 20 2 cases were discharged from hospital and over 800 close contacts were released from medical observation. Currently, 701 confirmed cases remain in hospitals for treatment, with 38 in severe conditions. Up to date, over 2 billion doses of vaccines have been administered in the country. On Thursday, the Chinese government assured that it will finance the construction of a space command center in the Tajikistan-Afghanistan border. This facility seeks to prevent any possible aggression from the Taliban. The lower chamber of the Tajikistan parliament approved the construction of the station in the Khamina district in the region of Haibadakhan that borders Afghanistan. The structure is backed up by an investment of $8.35 million, and there will be no presence of Chinese troops in the base, according to the motion agreed upon by both parts. Once finished, command of the station will be transferred to the landlocked country's authorities, who should prepare any possible aggressions from Afghanistan. The group of 20 leaders arrived in Rome on Friday for the first in-person summit since the coronavirus pandemic began to address the global economic recovery, rising energy costs, and supply chain problems. While economic recovery is the top agenda item, host Italy hopes leaders will set a shared mid-century deadline to reach net zero greenhouse gas emissions and explore a commitment to reduce methane emissions as well. At the head of the Leaders Summit set for October 30 to 31, finance and health ministers from the G20 bloc called for 70% of the world's population to be vaccinated against COVID-19 over the next 8 months. The G20 group, including countries like the United States, China, India, and Germany, accounts for about 60% of the world's population and over 80% of the global economic output. Chinese President Xi Jinping and his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin are expected to follow the discussions via a video link. The British Secretary of State for Environment, George Eustice, warned France on Friday that the United Kingdom could take to action if Paris insists on the threats that fuel the fishing conflict with London. France already warned that it could deliver sanctions against the United Kingdom beginning November 2nd if an agreement is not reached. The polemic point of the issue surrounds the UK's reluctance to provide France with fishing licenses, permits, and privileges that the nation considers being entitled to according to aided by the Brexit negotiations. After the threats and the detention of a British fishing ship in French waters, Eustace told Sky News that the two can play this game regarding the reprisals. In the United States, the convicted murderer, John Marion Grant, was executed by lethal injection inside the Oklahoma State Penitentiary after the Supreme Court reversed the federal appeals court's stay of his execution. Grant was the first Oklahoma inmate to be executed since the practice was halted in 2015 after botched lethal injections. In a 5-3 decision, the Supreme Court allowed the execution to proceed, dealing a blow to death penalty opponents and potentially clearing the way for what could be a quick cessation of executions in the coming months in a state that has among the highest rates of inmates on death row in the country. John Grant was on death row for the 1998 death of Gray Carter, a kitchen worker at state prison. Two people were detained by police at Los Angeles International Airport after flights were grounded due to reports of an active shooter in or near Terminal 1. According to an official, due to reports of a person armed with a firearm, 11 flights were diverted to other airports and 24 flights were delayed. Los Angeles Airport Police Division officers arrived at the scene and detained one person at the terminal. No shots were fired and no weapon was recovered. Later on, a second suspect was detained for questioning. Reports of the possible gunman caused about 300 people inside the airport to flee onto the tarmac. 2 people were injured during the evacuation and were treated at the scene by LA Fire Department paramedics. We have more stories coming up after this financial break. Welcome back. On Friday, the United States envoy to the Horn of Africa confirmed having met with the leading general of the coup in Sudan, who decided to dissolve the transitional government in the country. Jeffrey Feltman affirmed that he effected 2 meetings with General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan. In the conversations, Feltman expressed his concerns on the transitional period, the protests, and the absence of some institutions in Sudan. U.S. Special Envoy highlighted that al-Burhan did not mention the dissolution of the government, but assured that the security forces would go on with the democratic change to a civil power and promised to guarantee elections for July 2023. The Ethiopian army bombed rebel facilities in the Tigray region. An airstrike from the Ethiopian Nation Defense Forces destroyed a rebel base that was used to maintain military equipment. Thursday was the 7th day of government air attacks against the insurgent groups. Officials stated that the offensive is precise and distant from any civilian settlements, but the Tigray Front and the residents denounced that attacks are hitting hard on non-military targets, destroying vital infrastructure and taking innocent lives, including at least 3 children. A young man who had been in a 2-month coma died in Thailand due to the injuries sustained in the anti-government protest staged in Bangkok. 15-year-old Warid Samnoy died on Friday in the hospital of the Thai capital. The teenager suffered a shot to the head on August 16th amid a demonstration near the police station on the birthday of the Deen Dayan. Authorities arrested a male suspect and accused him of murder, but he denied charges. Meanwhile, protesters published photos and videos taken on the day of the incident when an unidentified assailant opened fire among the shadows of the prison. The public stirrings began in July 2020, demanding the demission of Thai PM, as well as the writing of a new constitution where the military powers are reduced. An agreement was disclosed between the United States, Al-Qaeda, and the United Arab Emirates to send more tourists to Yemen's Marib province. Sources quoted by Yemen news portal claimed that the U.S. and Emirati officials met with Al-Qaeda terrorist group leaders in the Hadramaut Valley, eastern Yemen, and agreed to transfer more tourists to Marib province. The move aimed to prevent the imminent liberation of Mari by the Yemeni army forces, and in change, the U.S. will release some Al-Qaeda leaders from the Guantanamo detention center to the southern Yemeni city of Al-Mukalla. A few days ago, U.S. and Emirati forces entered the district of Ghaiba Wazir, the main stronghold of Al-Qaeda in Yemen, intending to carry out covert operations against the terrorist group, but later on, their objective was to meet with the head of Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, Khalid Batarfi. In Australia, a power outage affected over 450,000 homes due to winds that turned down trees and caused damages to the rooftops of several houses. Authorities warned on Friday that most of the damages are severe, and so stated that some people will continue without electricity in their homes during the weekend or even at the beginning of the next week. The emergency services of the state of Victoria informed that they received over 2,500 calls with 300 people reporting property damages.
course, is another extraordinary event here in Victoria. I just want to give you some of the facts around the power situation. At its peak, at around 8:30 a.m. this morning, there were 526,000 Victorians that had been disconnected from their power supply. That's almost a quarter of Victoria's population, so it's a very, very significant number.
Pope Francis urged the political leaders who will participate in the COP26 meeting in Glasgow to offer effective responses to the climate crisis and hope to pass the message on to future generations. The Pope began his radio speech describing the current state of things as weak and a time when humanity faces health, environmental, economic, social, humanitarian, and ethical crises that are the foretelling of a perfect storm. The Pontifex explained that every critical moment requires vision, planning, and swift execution, thinking in a collective future. Isolation, protectionism, and exploitation are destructive behaviors, he hinted, whereas this occasion could be useful for genuine transformation. We've come to the end of this news brief, but first we invite you to watch a clip on how unemployment has risen worldwide since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. For TeleSUR English, I am Barry Gomez. Thank you for watching.